Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by actor Matthew Finlan. How you doing today, man?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I am so stoked to be here.
Oh man, this is such an honor. So for those of you, Matt's probably best known for his portrayal as Gerald Baxter in the Netflix movie Brazen, as well as his roles as Bart in Frankie Drake Mysteries and Charlie Chaplin in the Murdoch Mysteries, with guest appearances in Nurses, Grand Army, Working Moms, The Terror, and the upcoming Orphan First Kill, which is something super exciting I would like to talk about here in a minute. No spoilers, obviously. Um, but you began your acting career at the age of 4, performing in local productions,
Yeah.
moving to Toronto in 2012 to attend the George Brown Theatre School. Also received the Dean's Award of Excellence upon graduation in 2015. Congratulations. That is so
Thank
fucking
you.
rad.
Thank you.
And then after that, you worked with professional theater companies, including the Shaw Festival, Soul Pepper, Roseneath Theater, Buddies and Bad Times Theater, and Corpus. Now, first off, starting at 4, that's
Mhm.
insane. I have a 13-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and I can't imagine any of them putting in theater experience such as that. So, what got you attracted to theater and acting in the first place?
Do you know what? I have to sort of thank my parents. My dad did a lot of community theater, and my mom, she was a dancer and taught ballet. And so I was kind of like I was almost doomed just from a young age, but it was something I completely wanted to do. I Yeah, I just was drawn to it. The very first time I ever got on stage, there was this. I was at the Peterborough, the Lansdowne place is what I think the mall was called, and this guy was singing, and then he was like, "Does anybody want to come up on stage here?" And I like shot my hand up and I ran past every single kid and I climbed up on stage and I grabbed the microphone and then I just started singing. I was like rambling. Um, but I remember that was the very first time and I got a taste of it and was like, oh, I like this. I like this.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah. And then my parents just facilitated that and away we went.
that is so rad, man. And so obviously you really, cut your teeth with theater acting. You did theater acting, obviously graduated and made Dean's List. That's so cool, man. It's an honor to be able to have that,
Thank you.
that
Thank
feather in your cap. But what made you decide to try to move from the theater to the screen?
That's a great question, actually. And I would still consider myself as someone who would love to take a stage role and still will in my career. But when I was looking at my trajectory and where I was going, I was sort of reflecting back on, yeah, what was it that made me want to be an actor in the first place? And what were the things that got me so excited? And for me, as funny as it sounds, it was like the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that like, whoa, that's magic. Like, oh my gosh. Um, or I remember watching, I think it might have been Gravity, Sandra Bullock's movie, or
Mhm.
Interstellar. I can't remember which one. But I was like, oh man, I wish I was an astronaut. Like, look at how cool that is. And I was like, well, wait a minute. They're actors. That's so cool. Um, but I had that thought with both of those times that like it was movie and film and not stage, that was the medium that these dreams were sort of coming to me in. And I was like, oh, maybe I do need to focus a bit more on screen, like film and television, if I'm going to get to where that young Matt, whose like dream is still fueling a lot of this, where he wanted to go. So that's the answer. And then the universe gives you what you ask for. And I've been so
Right.
grateful for the
Well, the good
roles of.
thing is you're still extremely young too, so it's not like you've reached your peak or anything like that.
I
So,
hope not.
um,
Knock on wood somewhere. Yeah.
so another thing, obviously, we're going to be completely spoiler free, a hundred
Yeah.
percent spoiler free. What
Yeah.
was your experience like on the set of Orphan First Kill?
Oh my gosh, that was such an amazing experience. First of all, Julia Stiles is playing my mom. I was like, what? Isabel Furman was returning to play the role. That was insane. And then Ross of Sutherland gets to play my dad. And I was like, whoa, he doesn't get to play my dad. I get to play his son, I should say, rather. That's a better way of phrasing it. And then Brent Bell as our director, I was like, holy, I could list I every movie he's ever made, I'm a fan of. And so to find that out alone, I was like, this is wild. And then the tricks that were used to portray Isabel as like 10-year-old Esther, or maybe even eight. it's been over a year since we shot, so some of the plot details are a bit foggy in my brain anyway. But the tricks that we used to make her look the age were insane in the time that went into that. And like, I don't think it's a spoiler at all for me to say this. There was like a time where it was our very first day on set, and you'll see in the movie we're at a train station, and we were just normally we use things that are called like apple boxes, which I don't know if the audience would be familiar. They just like an actor might stand on an apple box to change their height in frame. And we were trying to make Isabel shorter than all of us. So by doing that, we were actually making all of ourselves taller. And the costume, Kim, head of wardrobe, she was really smart, and she ordered these platform boots that were like 10 inches tall, but only one pair for Julia. And she put them on, and everybody was like, okay, it's insane. These work so freaking well. So the next day, basically, there was a pair for everybody in the family, except for Isabel. And something that was wild that I will never forget about that set is like any scene when you go to watch this movie, where you see us as a family with Isabel, we have these platform boots on. And it's just so freaking crazy. Like, yeah, it's wild. Without giving any plot away, just you'll see that. And there are moments you'll be like, I can't believe it. Oh my gosh. And then we can have a chat after the release and be like, is that a scene where there's that? And I'll be like, 100%.
I would love to do that.
Better, my platform boots for these like glittery disco shoes. It was insane. It was insane.
And what I love about this is they're not using a whole lot of CGI age reduction here. A lot of it is practical. And that is something that, as somebody who grew up in a video store, big horror movie fan, huge fan of practical effects. And the fact that you guys are doing something so practical. We just did a top 10 most anticipated horror movies of 2022. And on everybody's list was Orphan First Kill. That made everybody's list. And the big thing we had was, how is the de-aging going to look? How is this going to, get pulled off? And hearing you, this is our first time talking about this to people that are listening. We have not had this conversation before. This is the first time me and Matt have talked about this. So to be able to hear you tell me that there's a lot of practicality done with the shoes and the apple boxes and stuff like that, that has my heart racing with excitement. And not only that, but you're a part of this film, and to hear you're glowing talking about it. That's 100%. How excited you are. Like, that shoots this movie even farther up my list, because I see the excitement on your face, and you were a part of it. So for something like that, a movie that blew everybody away when we had first seen it, and I'm not going to spoil it, obviously.
Like, what's crazy is, some of these auditions will come through your email, and they're very secretive. And this was one of those that was kind of like Project Untitled, and I think it might have been Untitled Sony. I don't even, literally, that title doesn't matter. But in the scene, the name Esther was there. And I went to the theater, saw the original, and I was like, okay, wait a minute. This seems like the Orphan. And so I just did my pass on it, sent that to the wind, and then got a call back. And it was like, yeah, so this is for the Orphan prequel. And I was like, I knew it. And then that's when I got to read the script, and I was like, at this point, whether or not I book it, I don't care, because I get to read this. And so went through it, and it just was like, oh man. So yeah, it was incredible. From the moment I got the script to the very last shot we did, it was just like, whoa, such a cool project to be a part of. Yeah.
And after the release, we could talk about this more afterwards, but I would love to have you back on so we can have a conversation about the film. That would be really, really awesome.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Matt, we know what you got going on here in the future with Orphan First Kill and what you're doing right now. But Matt, I want to go back to the past. Obviously, as you're starring in one of the best horror movies coming out this year, most well known for sure. So that has to start somewhere for everybody. So I want to know how horror started for you. Let's go back to the past, my friend. And your first horror movie was?
My very first horror movie. Well, see, this is the thing. I can't actually remember which one it was. So I'm going to say it's literally a toss-up between the Blair Witch Project and The Sixth Sense. which both came out in 1999, funny enough.
Both right here. So that way.
Look at that. Yeah, they're both so vivid in my brain. I mean, there are a bunch that I can also rhyme off to, but those two, and because I was so young when I saw them, it's funny, when I try to pull out like a favorite scene, it's actually mostly just like images and stuff, because I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. So I was often just watching whatever the older kids wanted to watch. And so arguably I was watching maybe these movies a little too early at friends' houses. And so I didn't quite understand the plot necessarily,
Sure.
but images were so strong. And, that's one thing I've always said about the horror genre, is that it will evoke like an emotional response more than any other type of movie, maybe second to like a Hallmark movie that makes you want to cry for no reason that you don't know, but like you definitely get scared when you're watching horror. And as a kid, I certainly was. And these two movies like set the bar very high. Yeah.
And I think these two movies are so impactful even today in the horror genre for completely different reasons. Now, obviously, the Blair Witch Project did not start the whole craze with the handheld camera, the found footage craze. It didn't start it, but it definitely catapulted it into the mainstream.
Yeah.
And The Sixth Sense, again, it didn't start the twist endings, but this is one of those movies that absolutely perfected it. And where that's a bonus and a negative is, one, it's an amazing twist. The first time you watch it, if it wasn't spoiled for you, you're just like, oh my gosh, no way that just happened. But the negative to it is, this is such a very good and very scary movie that nobody talks about because they're so focused on what that ending was. And so there's the negative that comes with it of, this is an amazing movie, but it gets ruined by the ending in a way, because the ending is that much more powerful. So I know you said you don't really have a scene that was your favorite or most effective, but let me ask you this. Between the two movies, if you're sitting down right now with somebody and they're like, I want to watch one of these two movies, The Sixth Sense or The Blair Witch Project, which one are you going to put on for them?
Good question. I think I might put on The Blair Witch Project. And the reason I say that is I just think it's aged so freaking well. Like, I watch it probably once every year, if not 2 years, you know what I mean? And it still is like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I think it looks more and more like found footage as it goes on. I'm just like, okay, cool. And not that The Sixth Sense doesn't, but everybody knows, like, I see dead people. And you're like, damn, okay, cool. But I think The Blair Witch Project maybe when you put it that way, I would tell someone to watch that. Yeah.
Well, and the thing about The Blair Witch, again, same thing, I'm so scared right now. Like, people think about that scene, but there's a lot of really high anxiety and a lot of stressful, like when they find out that he threw the map in the river and you have them fighting right there. Like, that's a huge scene too. And another thing about The Blair Witch Project is, I don't think in the world that we live in now, we could ever have that type of marketing again, because we didn't have Google in our pockets back then. So when this movie came out, none of us had ever seen these actors or actresses before. So we're just like, did this really happen? I remember, and I mean, we were so obsessed, like we still have, our stick things that we made.
Oh my God, like, yes. Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things where this is a movie that truly, truly impacted the horror genre in a way that, The Exorcist did upon its release. These are the things that is just so crazy to me, that you can actually have movies that are this powerful, that are still having that staying power today. What we're talking about with The Sixth Sense, I mean, you have the scenes like, the I see dead people, but when I think of The Sixth Sense, like, I think of him getting in that tent and turning the flashlight and you see the little girl puking.
Yes. Oh my God.
Like, huge jump scare there.
Oh my God. That's what it is. Or the scene where I think it's one of the first ghosts that you see, where the boy who plays with his father's guns, he's like, hey, I know where my dad hides the guns. And he's like, come. And you're like, oh, he seems perfectly lovely. He's this boy from like the 70s. And then he turns around with this gaping head wound and eyes from her being like, oh, as this kid. And for some
Yes,
reason,
dude.
the cupboard doors being all open in the kitchen, this it definitely started an obsession with paranormal for myself, being like, okay, can this be real? And I mean, I do believe in something. That's a discussion for a different day. But this movie, I mean, because I was a young little boy watching. I couldn't help
Right.
but see myself in Cole, and be like, okay, this is real. This is freaking real. So I was on the lookout for ghosts. To be like, put it back to me. I gotta see them.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing about Cole too in this movie is he is so charismatic throughout the whole film that you're really pulling for this kid to the point to where he reveals that the mother was, Munchausen by proxy, killing the daughter by keeping her sick, by pouring, the Lysol or whatever it was into her chicken noodle soup, and he shows that to the father because the girl had the presence of mind to videotape this. And that's one scene now that as a parent affects me a whole lot different than when I watched this as a kid. Watching this as a
True.
father, this hits me in a whole nother way. Like I feel the dad when he's crying, watching his daughter slowly be murdered in front of him, and
Yeah.
the way of the representation that this movie does that is phenomenal because it shows this little boy that's like, look, I can see dead people, but let's help people. Let's get out there and let's do something right. And let's figure out what happened to this poor girl. And then in the Blair Witch, you have the total polar opposite. Like we're talking about endings.
I know, right?
The ending of the Blair Witch Project to this day is still one of the best endings of all time. Now, I got to ask you, Matt, have you ever seen any of the alternate endings to the Blair Witch Project?
Wait, what? You might have just blown my mind. There are alternate endings to the original Blair Witch Project?
This Blu-ray has 4 alternate endings, one of which showing the witch. So, when we're done with this conversation, I'm going to write it down right now. I will email you a copy of all the alternate endings so you can check it out.
Thank you. I had no idea those existed. No, I'm just used to the one where you see, I forget her friend's name, but him in the corner, and then the camera sort of like falls, and you're like, wait, what? And then it's just like cuts.
I will tell you this, and I'm not going to spoil anything for those of you that have not seen the alternate endings, but I can't recommend enough checking them out if you haven't. The theatrical ending is still my personal favorite. I think that's the perfect way to end the film. Now, let me ask this while we're on the subject of Blair Witch, before I bounce back to The Sixth Sense here for a minute. Have you seen the newest Blair Witch Project, the one from 2016?
Yes, I have seen that one.
What were your thoughts on that?
I also saw the one that I don't know when it came out, but the prequel that came out a while ago, or the sequel, sorry, that came out a while ago, that I think was a huge letdown that we should forget ever happened. But
that's why I went right to 2016.
Exactly, 2016. I actually loved it. I loved it. And it kind of reminded me similar of The Ritual on Netflix. I don't know if you've ever watched The Ritual.
Yes. So good, man.
Exactly. But playing with the forest and the distortion of time. And I loved how in this sequel, the sun never rose. There came a point where it just stopped becoming daylight, and it was like, oh my god, because it's almost like the franchise knew that that's the scariest part of the original was the nighttime. Everybody was always like, oh, thank god it's at least day, and they were like, well, then let's get rid of the day, and you're like, oh no. So it got better. Yeah,
I love how the newer Blair Witch is really the spiritual sequel to the Blair Witch Project, because in this newer one, for those of you that haven't seen it, I can't recommend it enough. Heather's younger brother goes looking for her years later to try to find her. This is the true spiritual sequel to the Blair Witch Project, and I think it's phenomenally done. There's a lot of red herrings that come throughout. There's a lot of what is going on in this town, what is going on in these woods. And I think, because that's one thing about the original Blair Witch Project that I always loved, is the fact of, is there a witch? Or are these guys leading her to her death? Are they playing with her and toying with her just to kill her? And that's always been a very popular fan theory. But I do believe, and I love the absence of the witch. I love the fact we don't see the witch. To me, what you don't see is scarier. The fear of the unknown. If I'm looking down in 50 feet of water, what's down there at the bottom that I can't see? That fear of the unknown is what makes the Blair Witch work. And I think that if they would have used the alternate ending that you see the witch, it wouldn't have worked as well for me. But I want to bounce back over to The Sixth Sense real quick, because you just talked about one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, when you have the little boy with the, hey, come on, I'll show you where my dad keeps his gun. That to me is one of the scariest scenes ever. But another scene in that movie that I think gets overlooked a lot is when they're in the school and Haley Joel Osment is just looking down and he's looking up, and then the camera looks over and you see those people that are hanging in the
Hanging the
school.
tree. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, like that's another scene that like people can call The Sixth Sense a suspense or a thriller. To me, horror is what you make it. It's so impossible to nail down what a horror movie is to me. You can't say, oh, it has to have death. Bambi has death. It has to have jump scares. Pee-wee's Big Adventure has one of the scariest jump scares ever with Large Marge, and that's not a horror movie. But to me, a horror movie is, if it really scares me to my core, that's a horror movie. And The Sixth
Yeah.
Sense rocked me to my core. So my question is, growing up watching The Sixth Sense, you already talked about it a little bit, but it pushed you into the supernatural side of things. Do you think
Yeah.
that had more of an effect on you than the Blair Witch did in that? In overall, do you think The Sixth Sense had a bigger effect because it pushed you more into that supernatural lifestyle type of thing?
Interesting. And I mean, they probably both fueled each other, but The Sixth Sense probably did give me an idea that, like, as a child, you have a special gift or something, that there's a time when it's most powerful to see and to exercise that muscle. Because yeah, like I would literally like hunt for ghosts. That was definitely a thing. And I loved then watching shows like um Most Haunted. I don't know if you ever watched
Oh
that. So like
yeah,
paranormal show, that was one. Or then there's like Taps, I think, or Ghost Hunters, the Paranormal Atlantic Society or something. I think it is Taps. Anyway, so I was into all of these, and even Ghost Trackers was on YTV, and which was a show about kids going into haunted places and looking for these ghosts. And so I saw that with Sixth Sense and was like, okay, it's real. I'm a child. I can look for these places. And like I literally was doing Ouija boards in my friend's basements. I knew never to do it in my own house, but I was like, hey, do you want to do one? Your house is pretty cool. And yeah, so probably The Sixth Sense did have a huge influence into that. And I guess, it's funny because like Brazen just got released, and
Mhm.
spoiler alert, there are some scenes at the end of the movie where my character gets quite creepy. And I had friends that were writing being like, it's so funny, it reminded me of like this time that you did this joke, or you would do this thing. And I was like, yeah, as a kid I was never turned off from going to the creepy, the dark, the
Sure.
disturbed. And I think it's because of films like this where it was like, it's just play. And seeing how effective it can be when you yourself commit to it, being like, yeah, that's powerful. Like you still remember those jump scares or those performances that you're like, I can't watch that with the lights off. And so it's like those things. I think as a kid I was like drawn to, being like, how do they do that? And then playing it,
Sure.
like doing that with my friends, and then being like, oh. And so now as an adult, these moments come through, I'm just like, oh, I know this. It's funny. We call it your hit. And I'm like, I got another hit. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention, you were just talking about performance. Toni Collette's performance in anything she does is fucking gold.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I'd be lying if I said I don't cry still to this day every time I watch The Sixth Sense at the end, when her and Cole are in the car,
yeah.
and he's telling her the story about how her mother came to visit him, and he's like, "You asked her a question at the grave, and she wanted me to tell you every day. What did you ask her?" And Toni Collette's like,
Do I make her proud?
that to me is such a powerful scene, like a
No,
real
we're getting goosebumps
emo.
right now.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I got little emo goosebumps, man.
yeah,
Like for
yeah.
sure.
Oh my gosh.
Like
Oh,
it's what an amazing scene. And Toni Collette is one of my favorite actresses of all time. I think that everything she does, she's 100% a scene stealer in everything. So,
I
um,
mean, Hereditary, just like if we're talking, like that's one of her most recent impacts.
mhm.
That was insane. Yeah, yeah,
The dinner table scene alone is, you could have an acting class built
right.
around those three at the dinner table, like the dad being so passive and quiet, and then Tony being all up in his face, and the son being like the little dick. Like, she wouldn't have been with me if it wasn't for you, you know, and like
Exactly.
all the range of emotion that's happening at that table is one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema history. Like, I put it up there with the Joker scene in Batman 89, where, you know, where he's painting over at the museum listening to Prince. Pet Cemetery, when Victor's trying to tell Lewis not to go in the woods, and then he walks right through him and Victor disappears. Like, these are scenes in cinema history that have stuck with me over time, and Hereditary launched up that list. I'm so grateful my wife and I got to see that opening night in the theater unspoiled, and oh my gosh, it's one of my favorite theater experiences I've ever had. Now, we talked about your first horror movie, movies, we're going to pluralize it here, but now my little buddy Ghostface has a question for you, Matt. What's your favorite scary movie, Matt? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh, Greg, my favorite. Right now, I'm gonna say, okay, do you know what? Here's the thing. You never forget that movie that really scared you to its core for whatever reason, and just like, yeah. And for me, that movie and that experience, which I would like to say I have grown from and now can watch scary movies with a more mature audience or like frame of mind. But when I first watched The Strangers, the original, and I think it came out in 2008, and I watched the sequel, and the sequel, you know, not so much for me, but the original, I don't know why it freaking like, just there was no explanation, and I was like, there's always an explanation though. There's always a reason why, and it just freaking freaked me out. And I guess kind of similarly to the Blair Witch Project, the idea that there's no one to help, there's no escape, and there's a vastness around you is just so startling to me. And I was like, oh my God. And living in, you know, small Canadian town, you're like, there's so much space around me. Oh God. Everybody has a shed. Shoot, what are people doing there? You know what I mean? It's so, yeah, definitely The Strangers was huge for me. Huge. But oh my God, here's just throwing another one into the ringer. The one that might have fucked me up the most, if I can swear, as a kid, was House of a Thousand Corpse. I remember watching that in grade 3. Somebody's older brother brought it to a sleepover, and we watched it all. And I just remember like being like, I couldn't take my eyes away from the horror that I was witnessing. I'd never seen that bloody of a movie, gruesome. I remember
Brutal.
There's in the attic still, and like the stuffed animals, and the one hopping away, and you think she's gonna get away, and then at the very end in the truck, and I'm just like, I still see, talk about movies that are in your brain, I still see from that movie, and I'm like, oh, House of a Thousand Corpses. No. Yeah.
You talk about brutality, like that movie is brutal. And something you brought up with The Strangers, I think the scariest line, especially with the line delivery in all of horror, is when she's like, why? Because you were home. Like, that is such, because there's nothing about The Strangers that's supernatural or fake. Like, this could be this could happen in my next door neighbor's house.
Exactly.
You know, why are you doing this? Because you were home, because you answered the door. That's like, whoever wrote that, fucking brilliant, because that rocks you to your core. Why? I don't know. I'm bored. I want to cause shit. You know, like,
exactly.
Brilliant writing.
So, like, I still look through my window whenever I see someone knocking on my door now. I'm like, who is it? I don't know if they get it. I'm not answering, you know?
So I really enjoyed your company, Matt, and having you come here and hang out with me for a little bit has really meant a lot to me. I'm so excited to see what the future has for you. But
thanks, dude.
Before we end this, I always go back to the same question. Now we got a double skull count here. So first, we're going to start with the Blair Witch Project, because that's here first. Now, what we're doing is we're ranking this on a skull count. We're not ranking it on quality or production or acting. What we're doing, we're not being critics, just ranking it on how much it affected you. So 0 skulls, not effective. 5, very effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Like I said, we'll start with the Blair Witch Project. What would your ranking of the Blair Witch Project be?
5 skulls, man. I still think about it every time I go camping. You know what I mean? The Blair Witch is real.
So second verse, same as the first. We're going with The Sixth Sense. What would your skull count of The Sixth Sense be?
Oh, still, you know what? Just for a little bit of controversy, let's say a 4.5 skull count, but still very high, very high. Yeah.
Well, we talk about how, and again, everybody that knows me knows I don't condone drug use whatsoever. But watching horror movies is like a legal form of drugs. Like you get that high of being scared, and then you're always chasing that dragon again, trying to get that high again. And I
Exactly.
strongly recommend the Blair Witch Project over drugs, guys. I just want to throw that out there. It's a lot safer for you.
Mhm.
But as always, we're at the third act now, guys. The credits are about to roll, but before they do, I got to give credit where it's due. And not only have I been so lucky enough to have Matt here with me, but you can have him a part of your life by following him on social media. All the links are down here in the description. You don't got to wait for me to update you on anything because you can follow his career as it goes upward right down here right now. So make sure you're clicking these links, giving him a follow on social media. Don't go anywhere, Matt. I got a couple more questions for you, my friend.
Absolutely.
As always, guys, keep talking horror. Stay what you are. And we'll see
Thanks,
you guys
guys. It
soon.
was so nice chatting with you. Peace.